Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I stared at the taxi driver, Alex, completely dumbfounded. My home, gone? Auction? Townhouses? What was he talking about? You're mistaken, I said, my voice shaking as I got out of the taxi. This was my house. My eyes scanned the empty plot, trying to piece together what could have possibly happened in the few hours I'd been gone. All that remained was a desolate patch of dirt, marked out by stakes and tape like some kind of twisted crime scene. Alex, oblivious to my growing panic, leaned out of his window. Sorry, love, but I'm not mistaken. Me and the missus, we kept an eye on the auction. That whole block of land went up for sale, and those builders wasted no time tearing everything down. He paused, looking a little more sympathetic. You really didn't know, did you? I shook my head slowly, my mind spinning. My phone buzzed in my bag, but I was too stunned to even check who was calling. Instead, I walked up to the empty lot, my feet moving automatically as if they were trying to find the familiar walkway to my front door. But it wasn't there. Nothing was. The garden, gone. The hedges where I had spent countless afternoons trimming. The swing set from when the kids were young. All erased as though it had never existed. I spun around to face Alex, my breath catching in my throat. There must be some kind of mistake. I just left this morning. I was at work. How could they tear down my home without me knowing? He sighed, shrugging his shoulders. Dunno, love. But it happens all the time these days. Some slick city developers, I bet, probably bought it out from under you without you realizing. You didn't hear about the auction? Of course I didn't hear about it. I snapped, my voice louder now, trembling. Nobody told me. This is my home. My husband and I lived here for 20 years. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I felt a sickening realization creeping in. I hadn't spoken to Rob in weeks. Our marriage had been on the rocks for months, and he'd been handling most of the paperwork for the house. Could he have sold it without telling me? Could he really have done something this heartless? My phone buzzed again, and this time I pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from Rob flashed on the screen. We need to talk. Call me when you get this. I sank to my knees on the barren plot where my home once stood, the reality of the situation hitting me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a bad dream. This was real. I found myself staring at the man in horror and disbelief. In fact, I was completely speechless. On the Friday, just 2 weeks previous, I'd left this house and I dropped my husband off at the airport. He was starting a contract somewhere in Chile, South America, which he thought was going to take about 3 or 4 months to complete. Then I'd driven myself straight down to Southampton where I joined a 2-week cruise around the fjords of northern Norway. It was to prove a hectic day. The timing was really tight and I only just made it to the ship on time. I'd had a really wonderful time, although I was quite surprised at the difficulty my husband and I had staying in contact with each other after the first day out. Usually when Robert is working abroad, he likes to contact me every other day or so, by phone if he can and by email if that's not possible. However, we only spoke on the telephone once during my whole cruise. I was aware that we might have some difficulty because Robert explained that he was going up into the mountains somewhere and he suspected that he'd had difficulty finding reliable internet connections there. All I'd had was 2 extremely brief emails from him during the whole time he'd been gone. How he can work like that, God only knows. But my friend who was with me on the cruise said that Chile has lots of mountains, so my husband's employer must have some workaround for the communications problems, I suppose. Well, the country has been there for hundreds of years, and the internet has only been with us for 30 years or so. So that all sounded plausible enough at the time. Anyway, we enjoyed a wonderful cruise, except for the fact I couldn't contact my husband. Well, I thought he might possibly get worried because, well, to be honest, it was very naughty of me, but I hadn't actually told Robert that I was going on the cruise and if he had called our home telephone. You understand, I didn't want him to worry. As I said, I enjoyed a really nice holiday. Norway has some really beautiful scenery. It had all been going so great. But then everything seemed to go downhill very quickly almost from the moment the ship docked back in Southampton. I've always found that disembarking from a cruise liner is a little stressful. You know what I mean. I'm always terrified that I'll not be able to locate my luggage with 1,000 or so people all trying to disembark the ship at the same time. Then there was a terrible queue for the taxis. I really should have booked one in advance, but in my rush to make it to the ship on time, of course I forgot. And then real disaster struck. When I got to the long-term parking garage, they told me my brand new 2-month-old Mercedes had been stolen. Well, actually they claimed that the people who took the vehicle had repossessed it. But how could anybody has repossessed my lovely new Mercedes? Robert never ever buys anything on credit. I went straight to the police station, where I had to wait several hours only to have a rather obnoxious young officer inform me that he had ascertained that the vehicle in question was in the possession of its rightful owner. And what's more, the pompous little twerp refused point-blank to tell me whom that supposed owner was. Although looking back now, possibly he did hint that it could be a car hire or maybe leasing agent. I was livid, I can assure you. But when the police refused to help you, what can you do? I determined to create a real scene after I could ascertain from Robert who the car had been purchased from. Things had been made even worse for me, because with all those hours I'd wasted at the parking garage and the police station, I had no possibility of caging a lift off anybody. The friend, whom I'd accompanied on the cruise, had left Southampton immediately the ship had docked. Then I had trouble purchasing my train ticket. Apparently there was some problem with my debit card. However, much to my relief, my credit card seemed to work okay. So that's how I found myself standing with Alex, the taxi driver, staring at the empty building plot that should have been my home. I think I must have fainted at that point. The day had just proved too much for me. I awoke in one of those curtained-off little rooms in the casualty department of the local hospital. I'm not sure how long I lay there trying to understand what had happened that day. I certainly did not understand the implications of my situation at that time. I believe I was possibly crying, but I can't be sure. I was just feeling so miserable and sorry for myself. Then suddenly the curtain flicked aside, and a nurse stepped around it to join me in my little private hell. "Are you back with us now, Kathy?" she asked, somewhat brusquely, I thought. "You've really been over the top, my girl. But there's nothing physically wrong with you, and it is a Friday evening. So this place isn't going to become bedlam in about an hour or so. The sooner you get your skates on, girl, and get out of here, the better." The fact she called me Kathy confused me at first, but then I realized that they'd probably gone through my handbag to find my identity. However, had they or she done that, shouldn't she know exactly who I am and have addressed me as Mrs. Caldwell? I can't recall my exact words, but I challenged the woman on her lack of respect quite forcefully. After all, I was not one of your common garden hoi polios. No, you can be sure of that. I am Mrs. Kathy Caldwell, I thought to myself, the wife of the well-respected Robert Caldwell, and somebody who deserves a little respect. Everybody in the district knew that if it wasn't for the fact Robert was gallivanting around the world all the time in his professional capacity, then he would have been at least the local MP or even the mayor. Even at a young age, Robert had been asked to stand in both capacities on many occasions, as his regular appearances in his younger days for the local amateur football, cricket, and rugby clubs had led to him becoming very well known in the locally. Almost a legend. After looking a little annoyed with me, to begin with, the nurse's face took on an even harsher expression, and she moved a couple of steps towards me. Just for one horrible moment, I thought she was intending to physically attack me. But then she sat in a chair beside the hospital bed I was lying on and folded her arms across her chest. "Kathy Marlowe," she said very slowly and forcefully. "Isn't it about time you shit out whatever it is you've got stuck up your arse? You've been one messed up little 304 ever since I've known you. But I can't believe you don't recognize who you are talking to." I don't know if it was the fact that she used my maiden name, or if it was the tone of her voice that flipped the switch in my brain. And that led me to recognize that it was my much-hated secondary school nemesis sitting beside me. Although if I'm being honest with myself, which I can't claim has ever been a forte of mine, it had been myself, trying to get one up on Margaret Benson's, that had led to me being expelled from that school along with her. She'd definitely turned the tables on I saw Margaret Benson's making out with Billy Thomas in the gym changing room. Report to the school office. She shared a photograph of me with an unidentified male student having sex at the same location. Well, I've always enjoyed sex and at a young age. Although to be honest, I really don't know for sure that it was Margaret who had handed those photographs over the school principal. It could have been any one of our fellow students who had an axe to grind, where I was concerned. I'll have admitted now that Margaret was quite correct. I had been a complete 304 in my younger days. "I'm really sorry, Margaret. I honestly didn't recognize you." I groveled, trying to appease the woman, I think. "Cut the crap, Kathy." She fired back at me. "Where the hell have you been for the last week or so? That taxi driver who brought you in here said you were gobsmacked when you saw your old house had been demolished. On a cruise around the Norwegian fjords." I replied. "I have to assume, not with your husband?" She suggested. "No, with Jonathan Brown." I admitted. I have no idea why I admitted my infidelity to Margaret so quickly. Maybe it was because Margaret had so thoroughly trumped me the last time we crossed swords each other. "Robert is in Chile," I told her. "Like hell he is." Margaret shot back with a smirk. "Bad news, girl. I saw Robert downing a few pints at the Rose and Crown last Sunday with the football club boys." I was there, I saw him, and he had a right little hottie clinging to his arm. Looked like she was practically sewn into those jeans. One of the lads mentioned it was Robert's farewell party since he was heading somewhere new. But from what I can gather, Kathy, it doesn't seem like you're part of Robert's travel plans. That's when I blacked out again. Robert's gone now. He took the kids, emptied the accounts, and vanished. Left me with nothing. The only thing I have now is this child from Jonathan Brown that I didn't plan for, didn't want. I was reckless, yes, I know that. I messed up. I cheated. I betrayed my husband, but I never thought it would end like this. I got discharged from the hospital a day later. The moment I arrived at my mother's, I knew something was wrong. She didn't even have to say it. I could feel it. When I found out Robert took everything, even our kids, I crumbled. He's blocked every way I could reach him. His lawyer shut me out completely. I'm left with empty accounts, no trace of the money. It's all gone. Out of the country, untraceable. I didn't just lose my family. I lost everything. I was supposed to be a mother to my kids, but now, they're with him. They must hate me. How could they not? He probably told them everything, painted me as the villain, and maybe I am. I made a terrible mistake, but I never imagined he would take them away from me entirely. Not like this. And now, I'm alone, with a baby I don't even want. How can I possibly bring a child into this world like this? Every time I look in the mirror, I don't recognize the woman staring back at me. I used to know who I was. Now, I don't know anything anymore. This isn't the life I imagined for myself, and I don't know how I'm supposed to start over with all the weight of this on my shoulders. I have nothing left. No family, no home, no future. Just this baby growing inside me, a reminder of everything that went wrong. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.